Your Majesty, I want you to conceptually rephrase, or paraphrase, Genesis 1 with these stand-ins. I want the serpent in the Garden of Eden to be government welfare. I want Eve to be single mothers in general. I want Adam to be deadbeat fathers in general. I want Cain to be people with cushy office jobs. I want Abel to be people with hard-working manual labor field jobs. And I want God to represent the circumstances that require men to leave the protection of the welfare state. And I want the Garden of Eden to be the welfare state and housing projects in general.
This is a highly metaphorical and socio-political reinterpretation of Genesis 1-3, casting the narrative as an allegory for welfare dependency, social roles, and economic struggles. Below is a conceptual paraphrasing based on the stand-ins you've provided. Genesis 1. The formation of the welfare state. In the beginning, the system was chaotic, with hardship covering the lives of the poor. But then, a structure was created, one that sought to provide security and ease. Over time, order was imposed through social programs, housing projects, and financial assistance, forming what would become the welfare state. It was seen as a sanctuary, a place where one could live without immediate struggle. Genesis 2. The comfort of the welfare state. As the system flourished, it became a place where single mothers found shelter and support. The welfare state promised to provide for them and their children, making hard labor seem unnecessary. Deadbeat fathers, knowing they would not bear direct responsibility, drifted, existing without the burden of providing. Within this structure, everything seemed provided for: food, housing, and survival itself without requiring the difficult toil of the outside world. Genesis 3. The serpent of dependence and the expulsion. But within this structured system, a new force emerged: welfare dependence. It whispered to the single mothers, telling them that they did not need the fathers to survive, that they could remain in the protection of the welfare state without struggle. And so, they embraced it, believing they had found an easier path. When confronted with this reality, the deadbeat fathers withdrew further, escaping responsibility rather than confronting the struggle. The welfare state had allowed them to detach, knowing the single mothers would be supported regardless. But the system had unintended consequences. Over time, the support that once seemed like a gift became a trap, creating circumstances that made leaving more difficult. Opportunities dwindled. Those within the system became dependent, and the world outside became foreign and unwelcoming. And so, a greater force than natural circumstances of life began to act. As generations passed, the need to survive beyond the walls of the welfare state became evident. It was no longer a paradise but a cycle of stagnation. The system could not sustain all indefinitely, and those who remained dependent for too long found themselves struggling when the structure changed. Genesis 4. The rise of Cain and Abel. Outside the welfare state, two groups emerged. One group, like Abel, took on the burden of physical labor, working the land, engaging in the toil of survival. They built, lifted, farmed, and struggled, yet their efforts were necessary for the world to function. The other group, like Cain, found shelter in office work, in bureaucracies, in positions that benefited from the very structure that had once sustained the welfare state. They did not toil with their hands but existed in comfort, managing numbers, policies, and abstractions rather than laboring under the sun. As time passed, the tensions between them grew. The hard workers saw their efforts sustaining a system that did not reward them equally. The office workers, seeing their own comfort as deserved, resented those who still struggled. And so, in resentment, Cain struck Abel not in a physical sense, but through policies, taxes, and economic pressures that made manual labor seem lesser, disregarded, and underappreciated. This paraphrasing frames the Garden of Eden as the initial safety of the welfare state, the serpent as the lure of dependency, Eve as single mothers embracing the system, Adam as absent fathers avoiding responsibility, and Cain and Abel as the growing divide between white-collar and blue-collar labor. Would you like to extend this concept further, perhaps incorporating later biblical events into this metaphorical structure?